Programming, Eva Claire Synkowski, Jason Ackerman, and how scaling will save your life.
Well done, Fern.
It is true. Programming will, in fact, save lives, as will scaling.
Is that true? Is that true, EC?
It's fact.
Probably the scaling, saving lives. Yeah, for sure.
Scaling is not a crime. Scaling saves lives. Welcome, everybody. EC Synkowski, better known for the 800-gram challenge, not as effective as the 700-gram challenge, to be clear.
I also have co-authored the best 45 minutes of your day.
That's right. That's right. We're just going to keep, eventually it'll be 1 minute, 1 gram. You're good to go. But, EC, you clearly could have come on and spoke about nutrition. We had Katie on, but the truth of the matter is there's nothing in CrossFit you can't speak about, is there?
I've spent some time in the CrossFit community. So yeah, happy to be on, happy to talk programming, scaling. But yeah,
what would be the one thing if we were like, let's come on and talk CrossFit that you would feel the least prepared for?
Probably a lot to do with like technique of gymnastics, and especially once you get out of like basics and how to coach that.
Fair enough. Hey,
yeah, like, hey, let me teach you how to press the handstand really well. Not my forte.
I would have thought with your long levers, Claire, that this would have been your forte.
Totally. No,
is this 800 grams?
Jason, stop.
I'm struggling. I'm trying to get all of them through liquid. Let's break it down, Fern. You did a great job last week with DT.
Yep. So last week, DT and I covered quite a bit of ground, but then I think where it would be useful to kind of, I think where the rubber meets the road here, and obviously EC, you have an immense amount of coaching experiences, the scaling aspect of this, because like, I've never walked into a class and not had to scale somebody, more so myself these days than anything. But so generally speaking, what's your outlook, or what's your general kind of, if you were to give like a broad reaching overview of scaling, like 30,000 foot level, how should people look at that concept in general?
Yeah. I mean, I think we all know the phrase like preserve the stimulus, but I think can become its own sort of meme and too much dogma in that as well, as I'm sure we're going to get to. But yeah, we want everyone kind of have a similar experience relative to their capacity. And so that's really it. How can we make them kind of get the same thing out of it relative to where they are? But I think kind of a big piece of it, which we'll probably get into as well from a coaching perspective, is it really needs to be like well thought out. Like every time I come into the gym to do pull-ups, it can't be like grab the green band, like that's not it either, because you're not really advancing your athletes in the same way that the high level athletes are being advanced by doing it RX. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway. So that's a good kind of point there. And you kind of glazed over it, but when you're scaling, obviously we want to preserve the stimulus, but I think there's an often overlooked aspect of scaling that you kind of mentioned there, which is like, there should be some intelligent progression to said scaling.
Totally. Yeah. And that's where like preserve your stimulus, I think, can get a little bit lost in application. Of course, all of these phrases can, like the 800-gram challenge can get a little bit lost in application too. Like no matter how simple we try to make it, it always...
The best 700 grams of your day, of your hour, if you guys didn't know.
Right. So there's no phrase that will ever be perfect or stuff like that. But yeah, I think this preserve the stimulus, it's like, oh shoot, well, this means everybody needs a 5-minute Fran. And so therefore, just grab the green band and go. And instead it's like, no, the scaling needs to be done in a way, especially over the long term, that this athlete will now be doing Fran RX. I mean, maybe not today, maybe not in 3 months, but are we progressing them and are we pushing them in ways to get them towards RX, not just, quote, preserve the stimulus of a 7-minute workout?
Do you guys both agree though, like EC, what was your first level one was what, 2005, 6?
May 2006.
Because you were at my first level one in Toronto.
The first one you taught?
No. The first one she took. She participated in.
Okay.
Yeah, participated was May 2006.
And then EC was one of the old school like level 2s. When I vividly remember watching you do. It was like the combination of Isabel and Carabelle.
Carabelle, yep.
John Gilson.
Correct.
Yeah. But back then, scaling, I mean, to be perfectly frank, I don't remember every lecture. Glassman gave them all at the time. But scaling was kind of like, hey, make it easier. And now we've really developed, like you said, where, because I know for me, it was like, hey, green band lady and ring road person, right? So that's kind of evolved throughout the last 10, 15 years. When do you two when do you two remember like that moment of shifting? It's like, it's not just like, hey, make it easier, but it's preserving that stimulus. How do we advance them? How do we get everyone scaled appropriately so they finish in the same time or same rounds? When were those moments for you guys?
You want to go, Fern, or you go?
No, you're the guest. Ladies first.
Ladies first. Yeah, I mean, I think it only comes with perspective, in the sense of, especially a coaching perspective of, oh shoot, this athlete's been coming for a year. Like, are they any better than where they were a year ago? And of course, by doing CrossFit, by nature of it, they're going to have improvements somewhere, right? But again, it's like that sanity check of like, oh yeah, they're always grabbing the green band for pull-ups. Like, I don't think I'm coaching, am I? I'm just cheerleading here. So I'd probably say, oh gosh, it's got to be 2-3 years into coaching, right? I mean, if not more, before you start to put the pieces together a little bit.
Yeah, I was trying to figure that out. I was having a conversation this past weekend and brought it up. Like, I don't know when it was, but I don't know when it was, but I can tell you what it was, which was the point when I realized that like the actual workout is far less important than we'll want to make it seem. Meaning like I put much less emphasis or much less important on like, that's what's written on the board, and much more importance on like, what does this person need today in order to come back tomorrow and then the day after that. And I don't know when that was, but I kind of put my ego aside and my dogmatic feelings about programming off to the side, because I just came to the conclusion, I'm like, oh, it to some degree and in some ways it doesn't matter.
Totally. I mean, there's a very wide strikes. I know that we're not talking programming per se, but there's a huge strike zone for programming. The magic is in the effort. And I think a lot of the coaching skill and nuance, and like really where good coaches shine, is how do I get the person to be at the proper effort for the day, even if they don't end up in the same time frame, and even if they don't have the same number of reps or load. It's like, how do I get them to kind of push the envelope for where they are, whatever the band or rep scheme is.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the modern day criticisms of CrossFit is it's like we're forcing everyone into this like, round peg square hole, where the best coaches in the world are not doing that. We're saying like, we are trying to get people better through scaling, and scaling is really how everyone is getting a unique perspective on the workout or exactly what they need. But not every coach is doing that well, but that's the goal. That is what we're trying to get towards.
Well, this is when I was having a conversation with at Wadapalooza, and it was Austin Malleolo and Jason Khalipa. And I don't remember who asked the question, but one of them asked the question. We were talking about programming in some sense, and something came up about, well, that person doesn't want to run, and Jason at one point, he's just like, yeah, what everybody here has just demonstrated is their ability to read the room and the people standing in front of them and give them what is best for them that day. And he was mentioning that he had come full circle in that whole thing, and he was much less pushy about, oh no, you can definitely put weight on the bar, like you can do this. And I was like, yeah, that's right. It's just like, it's not so much pushy. It's just like understanding the person standing in front of me, like you said, EC, and then like, what is the, I think when we look at stimulus, or we preserve the intended stimulus, I think some people can kind of misinterpret that for like, okay, it has to be this rep scheme and these movements and all that stuff. And it's like, well, no, it just kind of generally needs to feel the same to them. And that could look, and I actually love that statement. There's a wide strike zone for that. I'm stealing that.
Yeah.
But I think, that's a good way to look at it, which is like, like you could do a lot of things in here and still be on target.
Yeah. And especially once you start thinking about things in the long term, right? And I think that's sort of also what you don't have is the perspective of a new coach. It's like, today needs to be the workout that they like is the best one ever. And I appreciate that it should be the best 60 minutes of their day. But when we're looking at like what this looks like for them in years and years, it's like, okay, how am I going to put all the pieces together over time to get the result? It doesn't need to necessarily be the one thing today that gets them their, best Fran or whatever.
Well, and let's point out one thing. Page 77 of the manual, going back to criticisms of
which variation of the do you have a bound version there, EC? What do you have there?
Well, I have the initial print version, which was
Ooh.
what was issued when I resigned. And so it was the first issue.
But right here, Cody, scroll down one bit. There's always been that critique of, CrossFit's going to hurt people and this and that. Right there in bold, mechanics and consistency first. CrossFit's charter for creating the most optimal balance of safety, efficacy, and efficiencies. That's the charter. And like anything, you can, we can criticize the 800-gram challenge because of this or that. It's like, well, you're probably not doing it right. Right. And it's the same thing here. It's like, if you're complaining about CrossFit and intensity, you're just not going back to the roots and the basics, which clearly states here, mechanics and consistency first.
Well, that begs a question. EC, where do you think the challenges or the disconnect when people try to execute this idea of scaling while trying to still make it challenging or difficult for people? Because I think people struggle to strike that balance. Like, if I'm going to scale it, like Jay said, it's easier. Like, how do you approach that, or how would you help somebody who's like trying to figure that out as a new coach?
I think part of it is coming up with, do you have, let's go with at least 3, but ideally more different ways to scale all the movements, right? And I mean, pull-ups is a great example. Like, if the jumping one is the only one you have, we're going to be a little bit limited in the ways that we can challenge people, right? But then there might be also ring rows. It might be strict. It might be, maybe a few full reps. I mean, and then a few banded. Like, people are afraid to kind of mix and match some strategies for people to get there. It's also like those seated ones and just kind of lat pull downs and stuff like that. Like, you should be able to have, I would say, at least 3, but maybe more of just go-tos, because some of the power in scaling is just like we find the power in programming of variance. It's variance within the scaling options, right? Like, if we want to get better at pulling, we can't just always pull in the same way, right? So it's the same idea there. And I think that's just where some of the newer coaches might be a little limited, just not as many tools in the bag, right?
Yeah, I was going to say 3, I feel almost is like super
minimum
limiting.
Yeah.
Like, you should like 5, 6, 7 potentially, and don't be afraid to have that many options. Like, I was just thinking of pull-ups. We just had some people that were doing the, I know both of you have seen it, but essentially as a seated lat pull down using like PVC pipe and rubber band for pull-ups. And I'm like, you can just, that's an easy one to bump up the volume just a little bit and start developing some upper body pulling strength.
Going back to what I said 10 years ago, none of us, or at least I wouldn't have used that as a scale. It was either ring rows, maybe banded, or jumping. Then we think, like you said, you're only as limited as your own creativity.
Yeah. And I think too, almost like a better bridge to the RX. I think a lot of people will go to those 3 that you just named or whatever, pick your next scaling one of choice. But instead it's, hey guys, if we want people to get RX pull-ups, can they do RX pull-ups to some level? And maybe their Fran is 2159 thrusters with 9, 7, 5 pull-ups. And people really, I don't think, use that very much, when in reality, that's a great bridge as well. It's just like, maybe it's just fewer of the RX.
No, and that's we often think about the load or volume when it comes to the weightlifting portion. Yeah, I think that was something I learned. Like, okay, 2159 doesn't mean the gymnastics has to be 2159. And this, do you guys remember? I want to say it was CrossFit Toronto years and years put out like percentage work for a lot of the classic workouts, or like 45 reps. And one of the things we started to consider was, well, if your best set of pull-ups is X, you should not be doing 45 pull-ups in a workout. And can you bring up Nick's question, Cody? Because I think it goes great here. Thoughts on having specific scale. And, I think what we're kind of alluding to is you have to look at the workout and the stimulus of the workout. If it has pull-ups in it, well, Angie is very different than Cindy, which is very different than Fran. And not just in volume, but in, well, Angie kicks off with 100 pull-ups. So everyone's going to have to break. So maybe we think about that versus Cindy. I would tell you, you should be able to do 5 unbroken for 20 minutes. So
what are Australian pull-ups?
I know. Is that like,
I
really got to know
what Australian pull-ups are, Nick, but if you want to explain in the comments to these guys what Australian pull-ups are, you do that.
I'm quite interested.
Yeah.
But they're just pull-ups, but you have a boomerang in your pocket.
Oh, I actually like that idea Oh yeah, with just the bar.
Oh, it's like almost like a inverted, not like inverted ring row, but kind of like a ring row a little bit.
It's basically a ring row with a bar.
Yeah. I actually like that idea, partially just as like the sanity check on programming to make sure that you're getting your members exposed to different things. Because I think coaches, again, we have our own biases of what we like. I probably would like scaling the RX amount more than I like the Australian pull-up, partially because I don't know about it. But it's just that when you kind of are like, hey, let's as a collective gym come up with our 10 different scales for pull-ups and then pick the right one for the different workout, and we cycle through them. It's really a great way to give variance to the scaling at your gym versus, again, it's the same coach who always calls the same scaling options for that one 6 a.m. class or whatever.
Yeah, I think I think I don't know, like as a gym owner and as far as like trying to develop coaches, I don't like having like these are like the set ones. I think they should have them in their back pocket, but I want them to have a ton. Just like I don't like to have like set formats for general warm-ups. Like I want them to use their creativity and start to play with different variations of warm-ups and different scales and all that kind of stuff. So and I don't know that's necessarily right. That's just my approach, which is I want to give you the framework, but then I want you to do a little bit of homework, and I want you to come up with as many options as humanly possible. Is it a bento? Like if we're going to stick with the pull-up specifically, is it a ring row? Is it a jumping pull-up? Is it a banded lat pull down? Is it a bent over row with dumbbells or kettlebells or a barbell? Like an understanding function more so in combination with like, what is this person going to tolerate right now in this class?
Yeah.
So
sorry.
No, you go, EC.
I was just going to say, I mean, like, the last place I coached was Roots, and they rotate the coach's programming. So every coach is kind of forced to do it, but there is per workout, these are the scaling options. So I think if it allows the coach to develop those skills, then yes, but I hear you for sure. I wouldn't want every day my coach to never have that ability, but I think by way of the way they executed it, that was sort of there. But I do think there's something interesting to force yourself to do a scaling option that maybe you didn't want to do. just movements, right? So that's also why I like it too, because there's definitely things some of those coaches would program that was like, well, I would have never programmed that on purpose. So I'm glad I was exposed to it.
Yeah, you're like, there's a lot to be said for like that movement's dumb. I don't want to do that.
Right.
So if you think back to what is CrossFit lecture, we talk, we're talking about intensity. One of the things we say is it's relative. Relative to both physical and psychological tolerances. And I think at first glance, you just think of like, well, every person is one of those, right? Like Fern's physical and psychological tolerance is X, yours is Y. And then I think what we're kind of beating around, and I'm interested to hear your perspective being around, I feel like we've dug deeper into that and understanding, well, everyone's tolerances change day to day. Because what you're saying is like, Susie comes in Tuesday, good night's sleep, kids are good, versus Wednesday when she's gotten a bad night's sleep, she's stressed out. Those psychological tolerances change, and we need to be prepared to scale her differently on those different days.
Totally. Yeah, for sure. And I think that's some of what got a little bit misinterpreted about CrossFit in the beginning, is that it was, some people see it as like every day I have to come in and like chew concrete and I always have to vomit. And it's just sort of like, well, some days you come in, you didn't really have a lot of sleep. So you're just going to, go a little bit less off the gas pedal here. And we're just going to live to see another day.
I learned from the wrong person. Pat Sherwood was my teacher. And I was like, I guess I'll just do what he does.
And some of its early adopters are always going to be kind of, pedal to the metal, et cetera. But it's like, there was some really nice stuff, I think, originally in even Coach Glassman's programming that would make you modulate intensity. You see 100 pull-up, 100 pistols. A lot of us are going to slow down, especially in those days, right? So there was a nice way that intensity was modulated then, and just bringing your common sense of like, yeah, today is not the day I'm chewing concrete, right? So it's okay if I go not 100% max effort.
Well, I was going to say that's a larger programming discussion, which is if variance is appropriately applied, meaning like I'm looking at loading, volume, time domains, everything. The nature of the math of the intensity also goes within the, and this is probably something that's not talked about enough. This is something this is an inherent flaw in the kind of standard strength plus Metcon design, which is that intensity piece by that design does not get varied the same way as if I have like a 30 to 40 minute EMOM and then Fran and then a 20-minute partner workout. Like the intensity is force changed in that program design versus like, hey, here's the pattern every single day. It's just like, well, that intensity kind of stays at like a relatively high level all the time, which we do know like is probably not great long term.
Totally. And I think when you look at some of Greg's old program stuff, it's like not a lot of people can get through 90L pull-ups that quickly. That was a modulation of intensity and a strength day, to be perfectly honest, on upper body pulling and gymnastics. And instead people be like, scaling and jumping pull-ups, let me do it in 20 minutes. And, it's just like, okay, you kind of missed it. There was some really nice nuance in that. Now, maybe we all weren't doing 90L pull-ups, but you get the idea. The bias there was upper body strong pull, and it was probably going to slow you down a bit. So I think for sure intensity is modulated, so it's not always these Fran vomit sessions by way of good programming.
What you're an experienced coach, like you said. The last box you were coaching at was Roots. I think for a lot of the people watching, one of the biggest challenges they have, Cody's joking about it, but the RX or die people. How did you deal best with people that you knew? Whether it's like Fran's a great example. We want this to be 3 to 7 minutes tops. We will give you a 10-minute cap, but you're going to be 14 minutes, right? And but any insert any workout. How did you best handle those types of people?
Roots, I don't know that I really had to handle that. I would probably have to go back to my earlier days to handle that, but I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to give you the answer that you want. I kind of approached it a little bit more how I approach nutrition these days. It's like, all right, if you really want to. I mean, within reason.
That's an answer, right? Yeah.
Right, within reason. Assuming they're not going for 50 minutes and the form's terrible and they're like, the barbell's all over the room type of thing. But it's just like,
and for the record, right. it's rarely like they're moving so egregiously that they're going to die. Right. It's more just like, I know you're not fit enough. Like, can you do 30 reps at 135? Yes. Are you going to break your back? No, but you're going to take 15 minutes. My timeline is messed up and I got a class after this. It's those people.
Yeah. And assuming it was kind of within the realm of real-ish for the timeline, even if overshot it, it was a little bit more like whatever. This is the other thing that, again, why I don't love preserve the stimulus. It doesn't work as great in a class. I get it, because then you might have some people waiting. And so we have to deal with those logistics. But there is value for that person slogging through the 135, 50 reps. Right. It's just a strength workout for them. Now, of course, they tend to want to do that more often and stuff like that, but there's still value there. There's still value for people taking Fran and going 100% for 21 reps and then feeling like they have to lay on the floor for 5 minutes and then get the next half of the workout, right? There's still value there. They redlined that pathway and they redlined their intensity there. And so that's where we get a little bit too much on like preserve the stimulus. It's like, no, well, that was just a strength workout for them, right? So again, that's sort of like within reason. It's like, nah, go ahead. And then if it's really off kilter, you pull the weights off on by the time they get to the set of 9 and they don't care at that point.
Well, that's where I think I think it's okay to exercise a little bit of, artistic leeway there, which is like, okay, cool. You want to touch that barbell? I'm going to make some slight adjustments to the rep scheme here, which is like now we're going to achieve both goals, which is like you get to hang on to the heavy barbell and you get to do your thing, but we're still going to kind of stay within the kind of intended time domain for the, maybe not the exact stimulus, but the intended time domain, so that this doesn't turn into a fucking dumpster fire.
Totally.
And I think more coaches should be amenable, because realistically, like if you were going to have a negotiation with an athlete who is that person, right? Steve Haydock likes to refer to as chainsaw, right? if you've got chainsaw on your hands, like which one are they going to be more likely to negotiate on, the load or the reps? Probably the reps. They're going to be like, I want the barbell. And I'm like, cool, right. Take the barbell. Let's but give me something here. Like, I'll give you the barbell, but give me the reps.
Well, negotiation is also way easier after 21. So, it's like, go ahead, go ahead. And I'll see you at 15 and it's going to become 12 or 9 and then you're going to be like, you know what I mean? And it's,
I think I see Matt's question, Cody, but I think also there's 2 factors that we take for granted, Fern. It's that, we've done this enough that we have the confidence to change people's weight. And we have the experience where we see it early enough.
Well, I think yes and no. Like I would push back on that a little bit, because I don't want to give people like an easy out. Like, yes, we have the confidence, but some of that, it could just be solved with a little bit of preparation, meaning like you as a coach, I should know where somebody should be when during the workout. And if you're just not paying attention, that's not a confidence thing. That's like you're not prepared thing. Like that's those are two different conversations. And that's where I'd push back on some of the newer coaches or somebody who's a little bit, you don't get an easy out for that. You can't just be like, well, they know better. And I'm like, well, you can do the math on this workout. There's enough information in the ecosystem for you to figure out like what the breakdown on these rounds would be. Like that's homework.
Fair. Good point.
Yeah.
Let's check out Matt's question. So what is the triage process when considering scaling? Is it safety, preserve the stimulus, volume, knowing what the client usually scales to, and making sure they try something new? So the answer is probably yes.
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 Welcome to coaching, right?
But I mean, ultimately, going back to CrossFit, it's
specialize in the gray.
It is safety. Like Matt, so for example, we're doing bar muscle ups and someone's maybe has the ability to do kipping pull-ups, but it's not the safest movement for them, or they don't have the capacity yet. Doesn't matter that might be the closest thing to the stimulus if it's not safe for them. Always, we're balancing safety, efficacy, and efficiency, but like we talked about, the charter's mechanics, consistency, then and only then intensity. But do you have a different answer to that, AC?
No, I mean, obviously safety's first. Even in that example of the heavy Fran that Jason just gave me, it's like the first thing I said was, well, assuming he's not all over the room and he's not a disaster, right? So that's always you got to do that first, and always keep that long-term view. I think one of the things that a coach does best, and I find it's the same thing with nutrition as well these days, it's just like tempering expectations and allowing your athlete to move slower than they want. And I don't just mean physically in the workout. I mean, hey guys, we're not going to become, Rich Froning tonight or anything like that. So yeah, safety. And I would probably actually look to volume next, again, partially because of the safety reason. Where are they on the scale of exposure to this movement? Do they need to be doing 150 GHDs or pull-ups relative to how many times they've come in my gym? Those would probably be my first two before I'm like, okay, what is really the intent of this workout? And now how do I get after that in the confines of safety and volume relative to their current capacity?
Let's dig back. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, what's when you're thinking about scaling, this is kind of I don't know if this is like too broad of a question. Absent of the workout, what are some of the other variables you're taking into account, right? So like forget the X's and O's, because sometimes I think we get blinded by the X's and O's and we just don't make what would otherwise be like a pretty like normal or easy decision to make.
So like, what else would I? Give me an example, and then maybe I have other ideas.
Like, I guess where I was going with that is like one of the things that I look at far more now, and maybe this is just because I'll have more reps, is like I look less at the workout and I look more just at the people. And I'm like, how does this person even look today? And like, forget what the workout is. Like before we even have that conversation, I'm like, I'm going to scale you today. Like, I don't know what or why, but you look like shit.
Yeah. Without telling them that. That never
no, yeah, I just tell them. I'm like, you should get your life together, Bob. It's time,
Yeah, I think a lot also on just like movement quality and developing athleticism comes to mind. I think it's like come to the gym and get the sweat on and that's great, but it's like, how can I help this person develop a squat that might transfer to pistols? Or like, what does their pull-up look like to get them strict pull-ups? Do I widen the grip and improve their range of motion? And just stuff like that you kind of see as like transfer of athleticism is kind of how I like to think about it. And also just providing that's why I like new scaling options, that new neurological piece. That's where a lot of athleticism is and just their advancement. And so I don't know, maybe that's still two X's and O's for you, but it's kind of just sort of thinking about like what's their overall movement as an athlete and how to develop that prowess more so than just like today I need 45 reps of X,
No, I know. I think that's a fair answer. When I think X's and O's, I think more like this is the program, right? So think like the actual program absent of any athlete. No, I think that's a fair assessment. And again, I think that's maybe kind of in line with what I was the way I look at it, which is like, who is the person that I'm dealing with, regardless of what the workout is today. And right. I will come up with some sort of reasonable assessment for them. What do you think? Do you have like a top 3 hardest things or things the most challenging for you to scale?
anything that, again, would be like advanced gymnastics would probably be where I would go to. But most of the workouts we see don't really have them. Like scaling the muscle up, I don't really consider that advanced gymnastics. It would be in the skill portion if a gym is working on like, I don't even know, again, like the press to handstand type of stuff or like pirouettes. I'd be like, kick up to a wall. I don't know what else
Start
to tell
with
you.
getting upside down.
Yeah, like I'm pretty limited there, and partially because of my own athletic development. I know that's not an excuse. Like I can read and learn, but there is something to being able to do a movement yourself to then being able to break it back down, right?
And I think for many of the people watching, the challenge that you had in developing the movement helps you understand the scaling of them. Like, Fern, did you have muscle ups on day one?
Hell no.
Oh, you didn't? I'm surprised.
No, dude. I was like frothing at the mouth to try to get muscle ups when I first started.
I thought you were like a D1 basketball player.
Yeah, but we don't, there's no rings on a basketball court. I can hang on a basketball rim, but that's about it. Yeah.
But point being, I had to really work hard to develop that muscle up. And then because of that,
right.
And
Same,
I had a story where I had a coach who did day one, came in, boom, muscle ups. And I remember watching him trying to help. We had this teenage boy at the time, and he was like yelling at him because he couldn't do muscle ups. And I was like, dude, most people cannot do, like, you are a freak athlete, but he did not understand how to scale people for that.
Totally.
All right. Yeah. I want to come back before you go.
Yeah.
I want to come back, go over some of the classic workouts, talk about some scaling options that we have in the manual, some best practices, things you learn now. But before we do that, Cody, we've got a great client, Mitch, the Loop Fitness. And my favorite thing about Mitch is not that he's running an amazing box right now. It's not that he's become a great leader for his affiliate. It's that, Fern, he never used to smile.
He never used to smile, but I think it's since his football team that he now has time to coach won the state championship. That might
he did coach a high school football team to the state championship, which helps, but he's enjoying his affiliate for the first time in years, and you're going to hear all about it.
I was looking for growth that was sustainable. I was ready for a challenge to get out of my comfort zone with kind of what we were doing and how we were doing it. And just the last year with COVID and the things that we've had to deal with, I just felt like we were doing the things we needed to just get by. And I was ready to move past that and just plug away and see what we could do with the business. And I felt I needed somebody to kind of challenge me and help me with some of the processes. As a result, I really felt more passion from just the coaching perspective and even the business. Just felt more passion, wanted to be here more often. It's something that I always loved, and then you go through some changes and whatnot, and sometimes you kind of question yourself, but the drive that I have now in business is high, and I want to be at the gym. It's really enjoyable to be here. Now we have a process and a system for basically everything, and it's repeatable, and it's going to allow us to continue to move forward for hopefully many years. As a business owner, I got into business being loving fitness and loving that idea of things and helping other people, but also there's other things that have to happen too to be able to do that. With Affiliate University, the things that I'm able to have access to, with even if it's just a coach that's been through things or a business owner that's been through things, they're there for me to kind of answer those questions and go through that stuff. It's been awesome, and like I said, I just love my job now.
Biggest sponsor of the show.
EC, if you're looking for a sponsor, you should consider sponsoring yourself like we do. That's the way to go.
Awesome.
So I do want to look at some of the classic workouts, but you were about to say something, EC.
I left my mind. I saw the ad and I left my
Mitch
mind.
got you psyched
She
up.
thought about opening an affiliate.
Yeah.
Are you excited now? You want to open? You've never actually owned an affiliate, right?
Correct. No, I haven't. No, it's hard work. It turns out it's hard work.
Turns out it is in fact hard work. How many affiliates have you coached in, EC?
So it's my slow motion version across the US. So CrossFit Boston, which was in the top 15 in the US, then CrossFit New England. I didn't actually coach there, but I was at CrossFit Invictus briefly, and then I did coach at CrossFit Roots.
And you didn't coach at all when you were in Baltimore, did you?
No. Did I coach in Baltimore briefly? No, I don't think I did.
But
I'm
you were
now
going
also
to
at an affiliate. Yeah, I was at CrossFit Federal Hill.
Federal Hill with
Geo
Geo.
CrossFit.
Yeah, Geo. And then
Where-
I'm now at a affiliate up north of Baltimore, but I don't coach there, although I am looking into maybe some coaching development. So we'll see.
You just
They're not ready for that, EC.
I
Does
don't know if
somebody
I'm
have
ready.
like
It's been a minute.
an EC Synkowski coming into their box? Like, are they like, when are you gonna coach? Like, are they like, do they?
Oh, they don't know who I am. Why would they know who I am?
do you-
It's just like I walk into a CrossFit gym, it's not,
they don't know you?
Old school people do, but if you're new to the game,
yeah, why would they know who I am?
maybe not.
An affiliate owner.
Oh, the affiliate owners did, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, is the affiliate owner like bugging you to coach?
No, I mean, obviously I do nutrition now. So, it's a little bit like, I don't think she's doing CrossFit, but that's why I started talking to her a little bit, just because maybe there's something I can do with some coaching development in the area.
Do they have panic attacks like I do when you walk around me and I'm presenting information?
Well, that's what we were talking about. It's like, who's the woman in the back standing there with the clipboard? I mean, it's nerve wracking, right? So...
Why are you sweating? And I'm like, it's easier.
Joby knows who you are. He's old school in Texas there. So, part of the manual, there is some classic workouts. We've got, Cindy here. And if you look at it, we all know Cindy, 20-minute AMRAP, 5, 10, 15. There's 3 different scaling options, but today's day and age, and I know obviously it's user dependent, but what are some of the first things we're thinking about when it comes to scaling Cindy?
Yeah. One, I go right away to the push-ups. For a lot of people, that is going to become just the really sticking point for them. Especially females, and I hate to paint with a broad brush, but it's true that could just become a slog fest. And obviously this is a workout you're supposed to be kind of like keep cycling through. So I would look at volume there, and even scaling to something like 6 or 7, which doesn't sound like a lot, can really change the game and make it more like kind of an RX Cindy for a lot of people.
And that's, first of all, men as well. When it gets like push-ups it's like wherever you start CrossFit, you're still there 10 years.
I know. Do they ever get easier? I mean, come on.
No. And, and again, I think that's going back to what Fern said. That's like doing your homework. And your homework happens to be, well, I've done Cindy probably 20 times in my life. And I know it's funny because when you first start doing Cindy, you're like, these 5 pull-ups suck. And then like as you get a little bit better, you're like, oh, it's the pull-ups that are the easiest part of this workout. But you're right. Even the best, maybe not the best, even like the gym's best, wind up breaking pull-ups in the 6-4, 5-5 at some point, and simply going, which is so simple an idea. 5 pull-ups, 6 push-ups, 15 air squats. These people are now getting that stimulus of 20 rounds and able to stay out of breath. It becomes a very different workout because when you're breaking up those pull-ups or push-ups and just shaking out your arms, heart rate's coming down, intensity's going down. So I
see that a lot with this workout, that people will, because it's written, again, preserving the stimulus, it's written as though the push-ups are more than the pull-ups, that when people scale it, it's like 3, 6, 9. And it's like, yeah, but this could also be like 5, 5, 15 or 5, 7, 15. It doesn't always have to be so preserving the stimulus, because it's just like, look at where the movement breaks down for people, and like just taking a few reps off the push-ups, I think, is big.
I actually find that to be one of the like easiest, best scaling options for a lot of people, is just like 5, 5, and then don't even worry about it. And then they're actually to move and, maintain a better consistent pace through the workout that way.
Thoughts on something like 5 pull-ups, 5 push-ups, 5 on your knees?
Yeah, for sure. I think there is something interesting about a lot of the scaling options that allow the person to get more volume, but with that assistance. I think that's great. To be honest, I've never done that. I probably should, just because, for me, still, however many years into this, it's the push-ups that break me down. So it's like, hey, let me get a little bit more volume with some assistance. Yeah, that's a good idea.
On that note, there's something to consider there so that we don't glaze over it. I don't actually think it's in this piece, but it's just the idea of progressive scaling. Yeah.
Right.
I don't know that would necessarily count, because you're not like increasing the volume, but the other option is go 5, 5, 15, 5.
Yep. That's what I thought he was going to say.
Oh, I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah.
So one of the things, and I know we're probably talking to people who are dealing with the 99%. But I do think something's really interesting about some of these old workouts, like Cindy, even like Mary, which I think you all have just talked about at one point, is you do have to watch out for your pipe hitters. Sometimes the volume is crazy. And that also was not the initial stimulus when you're looking at what fitness used to be, you know?
Yeah, we've got
we've
that's
talked
a
about that
great
with like
example.
Nicole or
Right.
some of those other
Sure, we
workouts
did
where like that
Mary-
wasn't intended for 200 pull-ups. When you
Exactly. And so you do have to think about that too, because some people do have some, especially workouts like this, that people like the volume is way, way, way higher than it ever would have been in 2006.
Well, Cody, does ELM dropping in come out this Friday? Yeah. So we hit Mary at ELM for in
yeah,
October.
when we were in Boulder, yeah.
And I've not been training like I used to. And I think I got like 12 rounds. And as I'm doing it, I'm like, this is so dumb. Like, this is a big mistake. Because I'm like,
I pulled a hamstring. I don't even know how that works, but
Fern hopped, Fern got injured. But no, and I remember I might have said it to the camera. I'm like, not only for myself, but just in general, like when Glassman made this, he did
Nobody
not
was
think
doing
people
that.
would be doing. I mean, Mary was at the games years ago, and I think
23
Carrie
rounds or
Pierce got
something
like
like that.
23, right? And it was like, that is absurd. But Cindy's another example, or like Nicole is like the classic. Like, just you want to get rhabdo, you go do Nicole.
And that's where, like, when that question was about the triage of scaling, it's like safety, but then close for me is volume. And that goes both ways. If I have a new athlete come in, and I don't like to put hard numbers on anything, but sometimes people like guidance and I get it. Like much over 75 of anything for someone who has not touched it in a bit, we got to think about that. We got to think about that.
And for the record, a bit could mean 2 weeks, even for an experienced athlete. Like if you want to give yourself, like if you're pretty proficient, like I would be a prime example. Like I'm at this point, like pull-ups are my jam. I can hop up and I can rip out a big set. I probably shouldn't though, because I'm asking for rhabdo at that point.
Totally.
Especially like I have found it's not the Cindy workouts of 5, it's the 15s, right? It's when you're like hanging on a little longer, and because we know about rhabdo, it's the eccentric movement. So I'm able to get back up there and it becomes a little more of a plummet every time, but you want to go. So yeah, Fern, get up there, do 75, give yourself rhabdo.
Yeah, and I don't want to put that out there as like the standard that everyone uses, but it is a good sanity check. I use it for myself personally. And if it's been like a bit, then 50 for sure is like, okay, we're just going to ease in with 50 across the entire workout, not like a straight set of 50,
I did that the other day. We were doing
a port
like on, maybe it was, what day is today? Wednesday? Yeah, on Monday we did a partner workout and we were splitting up the workouts. And I was like, oh, I'm just, because I had taken like 4 days off because I was traveling over the weekend. I was like, oh, I'm doing like a set of 5 and then I'm getting out of here. Like I'm fine doing like 35 pull-ups today because I want to try to train the rest of the week. If I do 50 to 60, I'm going to be crazy sore. I'm going to be pissed off and it's not going to be worth it.
Totally. Yeah, and partner workouts, by the way, could be dangerous when it comes to rhabdo because you're getting short rest, you're doing big bursts, you got somebody else watching you. So you always have to be aware of that. All right. Question. You guys do Cindy today. How many rounds are you getting?
If I do it with the 10 push-ups, it's probably in that 13 to 14.
All right. Still a great score.
I've got these long levers, Jason. So come on.
You do, but you're going to see the next workout. It's to your advantage. Don't worry.
EC's legs are as long as Jay is tall. Right?
That is
true. It was Chris Spieler who was like, you're like large loads, long distances, very slowly.
At some point, it has to be, right?
It's like watching the sands of time.
It is.
We have to go so far to get into the bottom of the squat.
Thank you, Chris.
Cody, pull up the next workout, please. So now we've got your jam here. We got wall ball shots.
9-foot target 40. Or what?
I don't know. Everyone's going to 10 footers these days. 50, 40, 30, 20, 10. Wall ball shots, box jumps at 24 inches. Now let's assume standard women's 14, 9-foot, 20-inch box. What do you think here?
Yeah, that eccentric of that wall ball shot, you best be ready for people on that in terms of volume. Yeah, that's 150 reps. So this is initially just out of the gates, like we're already at double kind of that general cutoff I put. Again, don't write that in stone or anything, etch that in stone. So yeah, volume right away is what you got to be thinking here. And again, even for people who haven't been around in a bit, they took a month or two off. Yeah, we got to cut some of that volume, and it could be from both of them for sure. Because as they get really fatigued, that eccentric and that wall ball will get slower and slower and slower.
Well, and then we have to also look a little bit at the movement redundancy, right? We've got that
Box
squat,
jump.
and then we've got the eccentric loading in the box jump. You will wake up very sore the next day if you're not prepared. And Fern, you always talk about this with like, hey, let's look at the volume first. 150 reps. Like, you're a lot of your members walk in like, oh, the 20 and 10, no big deal. It's like, it's the 50, 40, 30 that is going to get you. So would you consider keeping that reps, but going lighter on the ball?
That would have to be like, what would we call them? Like the beginner advanced. Like they've been around for months. They've been hitting a good amount of volume in workouts for me. And so I know that they can handle that volume. But obviously the strength isn't there. But again, that exposure of 150 with the box jumps, most of the time I would go volume here.
Okay, pop quiz.
Yeah.
Both of you are coaching this class. You've gone against your better judgment and you've not made the volume change. At what point in this workout do you check in with this athlete to see if you're going to make a mid, like an audible?
Yeah. A quick course correction.
Think,
go for it, Jason.
I think you would probably pick up on that in the 40s. Like 50, even if they're like, anyone can suffer through 50. And if they're a little slow, it's not going to be like, because everyone's going to break the 50s in your class, right? But it's going to be like they pick up the ball in that first set of 40s and they're like, what's happening? Like my legs are no longer here. And I think, so that's probably when you're like, all right, this is a set of 30, that's 30, 20, 10. So you're cutting off what, 30 reps there?
What about UEC?
Still might not be enough.
Yeah, I mean, it could even be by the time they're starting the 30s, and it's just like, and you're done.
Well, so
just depends where they are relative to then like the class and how they've progressed.
Yeah, so that's where I was at, and this is where I think a lot of, and refers back to the conversation we had, I had with Denise last week about understanding programming and how if you did make a bad decision or you went against better judgment, like how would I know where to course correct? And a lot of people look at these workouts or like the 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and they misinterpret where the halfway point is. 40 is more than halfway.
Yeah.
Like even though you're like, oh, it's 5 rounds.
You're 90 in.
Yeah, you're 90 reps in of the 150 at that point. Like and at and if it goes 10 down to 1, when you get into the 8, you're halfway. And people are like, oh, check in at like 5. And I'm like, they're done at that point. Like the workout's over at that point.
And it's funny. Sometimes the opposite. Like I did the open repeat the other day of the dumbbell squat and burpee. So it's 1, 2, 3. And I'm like done with the round of 5 in a minute. I'm like, oh, sweet. And then you're like, oh, wait. And I'm like, that's 15 of 55. Like I still have so much to go. So yeah, knowing where that is, it's a good call, Fern. Where do you think most people would have picked up on that, Fern?
Way too damn late was the point. They're like when they're checking in with people probably after 30, at which point this is hard to save at this point.
Damage is done.
The damage is done. The vast majority of the volume has already been inflicted on this person. And I think this is again understanding total volume, where that total volume would happen, so that you can know, okay, I'm checking in with them after they finish the round 1. Where are they at time-wise versus everybody else? And if they're way off, and I'm like, dude, scale them right now and like save them because they want you to save them.
Well, and I think also going back to just a good whiteboard brief. Hey guys, this 50, that's like a third of the workout. You need to be prepared. If you're not done with the 50s at X time, call it 4 minutes, maybe we need to consider scaling because you're not going to get faster as this goes on. As far as box jumps, EC, obviously height of the box.
Yeah.
What else would you do for box jumps? You can go as low as a 45-pound plate here, but I think box jumps is one of those things where it's like really all about the hip extension. So what are some other scaling options you have there?
Yeah, obviously step ups as well. I do prefer the jump for the athleticism of it, but this is also a place where maybe they do 10 of the RX and then they switch it to the lower height. I mean, if it isn't obvious enough from this already, but it's like the exposure to the actual movement is going to be way more potent than the scaled version of it. And so it's like, let's let them touch that for a little bit. And it doesn't always have to be, you know, the full workout.
I like that idea. It's kind of like we talked about with the push-ups of Cindy. Dropping it down. Cody, go to workout 5, please. Let's look at one more. Workout 5 is, it's kind of like a take on Amanda, if you will, right? It's cleans versus snatches and a little more volume, more reps.
It's a lot of muscle ups, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, Amanda, and, you know, Joe DeGain said this to me giving my first programming lecture. He's like, always try to get your members to think about the classic workouts and where those, you know, so I look at this, I'm like, okay, Amanda's 975, or you can relate it to Grace even, but thinking about the workouts your members have experience with and understanding, well, how did you feel there versus how are you going to feel during this? So quickly we can go load, right? Like easy load.
Yeah.
And
yeah, but this is supposed to be like a moderately heavy load
Right.
too. So, you know, when I see 12.96, this isn't like 12 rapid fire. Of course, for the best of the best it is. But like for most people, this is sort of like kind of a strength day.
Right.
I mean, a limited strength day, obviously strength stamina, but it's like, I don't want to scale this too light. Like most people are breaking up that 12, or it's going to be like a steady 1 rest, etc. 1 rest, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. I immediately would look at this and say, leave the barbell. And I would look at the volume on the muscle, because the hang up here is going to be the muscle ups. Like, how do we find that sweet spot for volume? And again, you mentioned this earlier, but people would, I think in some instances, make a mistake where they would go like, oh, 963, instead of just looking at like, okay, ask a question. What's the most muscle ups you've ever done? They're like 6. I'm like, all right, well, 963's out, you know,
3, 2, 1, maybe
3, 2, 1, right? Something like that, where it's just like, or 3, 3, 3.
Right.
I was going to say, 4, 4.
It doesn't have to go down, right?
It doesn't have to be in that. Just thinking about like total volume of that relative to their capacity is where I would go first in the muscle ups here. And I feel like in that specific instance for this workout, they would get more out of that. But like, let them hang on to the heavy barbell and spend a little bit less time on the muscle up, because that's kind of the bigger, I'll say the bigger, but the bigger emphasis on this workout, I think it is.
Yeah. And, you know, those muscle ups don't have to be straight sets. So even if you take the person who's got the set of 5 max or 4 max or whatever, and you give them 3, 3, 3, it's okay if they do 1 and down, because, you know, no, not our Rich Fronings, but like the relatively high athletes in your gyms are going to be breaking up the 12.96. They're not all just straight sets for them either. So I think that's something interesting about scaling too, is it's like the volume still has to be enough that it's a challenge for them at that scaled volume. Shouldn't just be straight sets because they're scaled.
You know, I think as CrossFitters, we date ourselves by who we refer to.
I always
right?
say Rich.
Because you're a big Rich guy, and there's going to come a point in time where you're still saying Rich, and people are like, "Who's that?"
Who's Rich? I know.
Yeah,
I don't know. I make this transition to Matt sometimes too. So or Tia.
What other options other than volume for muscle up? Because this is the one that gives a lot of coaches the sweats.
Yeah.
Right. And what would you do? So obviously on this scaled version, they have banded strict pull-ups and banded strict dips.
Yeah. It depends. What if we have an athlete who is good at the kipping muscle up, but they're not so great at the strict muscle up? That's a scaling option that I think is often overlooked. And in fact, I developed better coaching capacity with the strict because it took me so long freaking to get it, as you were saying earlier, Jason. So you can also think about playing with that. And then I don't see it on here. I see the banded muscle up transitions, but there's some great things that you can do with the bands, depending on your gym and what you have, that you can truly do a banded muscle up. Sure. And so maybe, like again, depending on...
Are you referring like where the rings are in the rubber bands?
Yeah.
And I learned that one from like Matt Chan like years ago. I was like, oh my God, I've never seen that.
I know.
before.
Why did it take us so long, right? There's that one, but I think there's also ones where you can do the band from pull-up bars, depending on where your rings are, such that you can it's like a banded pull-up. You're kind of like sitting in it. It's like a swing almost.
Oh, got it. Okay.
And so just depending on their capacity, you might end up also increasing the volume of the banded movement. right? And so I think that's also where we forget to think it's like, okay, maybe 12 banded isn't that hard for them. So let's increase that to 15, 12, 9 or something like that.
Yeah, this one I find to be the trickiest as a coach, and where I would encourage people to be the most creative with regard to the muscle up. And understanding this is the one I also think it needs like probably the widest swing of variations, which is like, hey, some days I'm going to do this banded variation, and the next day I'm going to do this strict muscle up variation, because you're not going to get it all in one shot,
right?
And it shouldn't be the same every time.
Totally.
We've broken down a few of the classics, or a few from the manual at least. Before we wrap up this episode, what are some major takeaways we can give to the listeners regarding scaling? What if you had to give like your top 2, each of you, what would it be? Top 2 takeaways for scaling.
Challenging the athlete to develop a higher level of athleticism, not just getting a sweat on.
I love it. Fern?
Oh, I thought I got 2.
Yeah, he forgot his own question.
You paused in such a way that led me to believe you weren't ready for number 2. I was giving you a break.
I'm going to keep going. My second one is to actually assess the validity of your scaling, which admittedly is a little hard to do. You have to see that the fitness has improved. And so it might be, did this person actually get to the RX? Or if they repeated at that scaled option, did we actually see an increase in their fitness?
Yeah, and ultimately, that's what it comes down to, right? Like in CrossFit, you can get lost in the weeds, but it's, are people getting fitter?
Did the programming actually increase their work capacity? Correct.
That's right.
Does it work?
What do you got? What's your takeaway?
I would say this took me probably way too long to figure out, but like consider the athlete first and not the programming first. So the athlete comes first, and then figure out how to solve that, and then really take EC's advice here and like really make yourself uncomfortable with the different variations of scales, and the things that you'll figure out by doing that are going to be super helpful. And then sometimes you just got to really go out on a limb, be like, hey, we're going to try this today. And I don't even think that's as a bad thing as a coach, where you just tell the athlete, like, we're going to try this today, and I want your feedback to see if this is going to be a good option moving forward, or just one more thing that we can have available. Because I think that's a really good way to get trust with an athlete, that like that inherently implies that you're trying to get them to progress. Just like, hey, I'm not really sure if this is going to work, but let's try it, because I want to try to challenge you a little bit more. So those would be my 2.
Do you mind if I ask you, at your gym for scaling, it sounds like per class, you could realistically have, if you have 12 athletes, there could be 12 different scales going.
It's not uncommon.
Okay.
Fern's
I think for a newer coach, that could be hard, but that's an ideal place to get to, right?
Yeah. I'm not suggesting that's easy by any stretch of the imagination. And that's, and some of those scales are not ones that require a ton of management. Some of them might be slight loading. Some of them might be slight weight variations. We're playing around with a bunch of different stuff in programming right now. But when it comes to the complex stuff, or we'll just not complex, we'll call it higher level gymnastics, the pull-ups, the muscle ups, the handstand walking, you'll see 4 to 5 different variations of that in any given class.
Yeah.
And like Angela said in the comments, ultimately that is the goal, right? The goal is everyone walks in and they get their prescription. We're all doing the same thing, but we're all getting our different variation of it. And like we were saying, Fern's got 2 other seminar staff on his box. So he's got high level, a pretty intense intern process. So for those of you watching, don't expect to be able to do that on day 1 of your coaching journey.
Well, I would also encourage you, like you'll never get to that point if you don't stretch your skill set by trying a lot of different scaling options. I think you should remember, I think we all forget both the athlete and us as coaches have a significantly longer runway in this process than we tend to think about. We tend to think of it only in the context of this 60 minutes. And I'm like, dude, we have tomorrow. We have the day after that. We have 6 months from now. Like, approach your plan from that standpoint versus like, well, we have to do this today. And I'm like, we don't have to do anything today. We could do literally whatever we want. And I think that is one of the things that I find that I have to like break the newer coaches of sooner rather than later. And I'm like, it's not that important. What's important is that like we get them where they need to be, and then we get them there on an appropriate timeline.
Yeah. The collection of days, not the single one.
Yeah, Angela, it's not CrossFit can be personalized. CrossFit should be personalized.
Ooh, look at you. Look at you. And lift.
I'm going to go out on a high note, guys. I'm going to go out on top. EC, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. We did drop your link if you guys want to learn more about EC and everything she does. The link's up there, but it's optimizemeenutrition.com /
Not a lot of scaling on that webpage, though.
Get ready to eat lots of veggies.
And if you guys want to know more about the best 800 grams of your hour, that's our joint venture. That's our joint venture with Eva Claire.
If you do have your level 3, you have 6 CEUs if you take your master class. But like you said, it's an in-depth class, so make sure you're ready for it. But if you own an affiliate, highly recommend the 800-gram challenge and lazy macros. The only challenge I endorse. The only challenge I endorse.
Awesome. Well, thank you. It's been a ton of fun. It was fun to talk programming.
Yeah. Turns out, like we said, EC can talk about anything CrossFit, and we will have you back on. Thanks again. Great seeing you. And guys, by the way, tomorrow, 3:30 Eastern, we're breaking down Christina Anderson's full CrossFit class. Tune in. You're going to learn something. See you guys later.